This Sunday, the nightmare continues for dozens of Kenyans who have found themselves stuck in the coronavirus ground zero, China, and are being discriminated against by the Chinese and being accused of bringing the virus into China. Today, though, the focus now shifts on how the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has made a mess out of this, seemingly insinuating that the Chinese government is right. Meanwhile, the distress calls from various Chinese cities to Nairobi continues. Into the fourth week of a daily national curfew and third week of restricted movement in and out of coronavirus epicenters in Kenya, how seriously are Kenyans taking this global pandemic? We focus on the behavior of our citizens hot on the heels of yet another painfully sad tale of people literally playing with fire, traveling all the way from Nairobi to Nyanza to the county of Homa Bay pretending to be mourners, and in the process transporting coronavirus to the lakeside county. In politics today, our cameras remain trained on the ruling Jubilee Party. It seems the political mutiny against Deputy President and Deputy Party Leader William Ruto is not going to be a walk in the park, but is the second in command out of the woods yet. Will the party survive this latest divide? I'm Ben Kitili, live at the KTN News Center here in Nairobi. This is Inside Politics. We will try to analyze the biggest political and policy issues in the country today. Now, let's get right into it. The Chinese nightmare continues for dozens of Kenyan citizens stuck in various cities across China during the COVID-19 global pandemic, with more and more claims of discrimination by Chinese authorities. Distress calls to Nairobi have seemingly gone unheeded, with Kenya's Ministry of Foreign Affairs receiving massive flack over the issue. Now, the government has said it can evacuate its citizens in China, but they must pay for their flights. Our investigations reporter Brian Obuya filed this report earlier in the week.
For the past few days, local media houses across Africa have been highlighting their plight. 2 days ago, ANC leader Musalia Mudavadi became the first Kenyan politician to give his position on the inhumane treatment of Kenyans in China.
Our own government seems to be silent on this. We need to know what plans, if any, our government has to evacuate Kenyans, especially those in hardship circumstances in places like China.
All this coming in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. But the state has now spoken out for the first time through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Where do these people want us to go? It's very sad situation.
Kitakuwa na kubuy food hata kama unataka nini wanasema hawezi uzia mtu mweusi.
Many of them are inundated with demands for help, including demands for evacuation.
But there will be no evacuation.
We don't have one because we're not planning to do that. As I said, you see, how do you do India and not do Iran? How do you do Iran and not do Italy?
The situation in the Far East country is so bad that posters like this one have been plastered in malls and restaurants asking Africans to stay away. But the Kenya government suspects that those Kenyans in China might have refused to abide by the Chinese laws.
And so they were put in a situation where their instructions which were interpreted as eviction, which were really about social distancing.
The Kenya government now says it has engaged China over this sad and unacceptable state of affairs.
We have engaged them bilaterally, yani Kenya and China. We have engaged them regionally, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, the ambassadors working together in China, saying this is unacceptable. This must be resolved. And we have engaged them continentally.
But beyond China, we need to know what is happening to our people, wherever they may be from home, throughout the world. This is an imperative that the government must address with all the urgency it deserves.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has not gone further, apart from just admitting that Kenyans, not just in China, but across the globe, are currently affected by the ongoing pandemic sweeping across the world. In fact, the government has now pronounced itself, saying that it's not going to evacuate those in China currently facing discrimination, racial discrimination in the Far East country, or in fact anywhere else in the world. Brian Obuya, KTN News.
Thank you, Brian. So the latest information is that we understand the government is willing to help Kenyans in China, but they must be willing to pay for their flights home. And of course, getting here, they have to be ready to get into quarantine for 14 to 28 days. It is a story that we are keeping an eye on, pressure mounting on the government to do something about the Kenyans, its citizens, that are seemingly stranded in various Chinese cities. Now, my panel is here with me to try and help me, analyze some of these issues. I have with me lawyer Ken Echesa. I have with me political risk analyst Dismas Mokua, and of course, communication strategist Mark Bichachi joining us from the comforts of his house. Of course, all the guests coming from various locations in trying to social distance ourselves right here in studio. And gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Let me begin with you, Dismas. Are you satisfied with the measures the government, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, is trying to say, or what they have been trying to justify the distress calls that we get almost on a daily basis on social media? We had the Principal Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Macharia Kamau, earlier in the week, trying to explain that what's happening in China with Kenyans there is actually normal. Are you satisfied?
Not at all. Ben, we must ask ourselves, how has Jubilee run our foreign affairs docket? Right from the time they took office, they came up with a very proactive economic diplomacy philosophy. And Kenyans have been encouraged to go far and wide outside Kenya, either to go study or do business, or, whatever business they want to do, provided it's legal. And it's a statement of fact that Kenya has signed so many bilaterals, and there are many Kenyans outside there making a lot of progress, doing a lot of businesses. Now, this coronavirus has exposed the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It now seems the case that if a Kenyan goes to Uganda and is doing business and he gets into any kind of trouble, our High Commissioner will not be able to come and help them. That's the sad situation obtaining today. If there is a Kenyan in distress anywhere in the world, Ministry of Foreign Affairs through the local ambassadors and High Commissioners are supposed to come and give help. At this stage, when you look at the footage, Kenyans are literally bleeding in China, and they are pleading for Kenya to come on board and assist them. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs through the Principal Secretary as well as the Cabinet Secretary, they are very mute. There's a lot of silence, deafening silence coming from Foreign Affairs. And when Macharia Kamau speaks, if you are not watching TV, you may confuse him to be the Chinese ambassador to Kenya. So at some stage, you begin to ask yourself, who is Ambassador Macharia Kamau serving? Is he serving Kenyans, or is he serving Chinese interest in Kenya? It's unacceptable today for any Kenyan anywhere to be in a state of distress, and all we can do is come up with excuses that if you need to get people out of China, then you need to go to India, then you need to go to Italy, wherever it is. Kenyans do not care about that kind of explanation. They want help, and they want help when they need it. Because when you travel with the Kenyan passports. And the passports on page 2, it's indicated that the president of Kenya is requesting that you be given such services to enable you to do your business. One would have expected that the CS and PS would be doing regular briefings telling us there are 3,000 people in China, and out of these 3,200 are in distress, and we are making plans to bring them home. That's number one. Okay. Then number two, expecting people who are in distress to pay their way back to Kenya, again, is unacceptable. And we need to ask ourselves, what would other ministers do? For instance, if it was Robert Ouko running this ministry, what would he do? If it was the late Dr. Zachary Chionyonka, what would he do? If it was Wetangula, what would he do? But for Wetangula, we have an answer. During the administration of Kibaki, and Kenyans were in distress in South Africa, he ordered that the Kenyans be brought home, and the Kenyans were brought home. So this idea that the government doesn't have money, yet you have the COVID fund available, is a logic which is upside down.
But Akili, a lot of Kenyans have expressed disappointment in the manner in which the Principal Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Macharia Kamau, dealt with this or the utterances he made earlier in the week. But listening to him, and he's one of this country's top diplomats, he says that, you can't airlift people from China, then ignore people in India or Iran. But from where you sit, do you think the Chinese situation calls for, a more urgent approach?
Absolutely. It is because the Chinese situation is sui generis. It's sui generis in a manner that we have outright racial discrimination. Kenyans are being beaten left, right. They're being denied essential services. And the PS is here telling Kenyans that they can't evacuate them. They can't help them. And that what they are facing is being faced by Kenyans elsewhere. The statement by the PS is unfortunate. It is regrettable. And we require the minister, the CS, to come and apologize to Kenyans. Ben, the reason why countries establish missions abroad is to secure the strategic interests of the sending state and secure the nationals of the sending state in the receiving state. We have an embassy in China to help not just secure the strategic interests of Chinese in this country, but also to secure Kenyan nationals in China. But what is happening to Africans in China is because China has become some sort of a benevolent spirit in Africa, a spirit that cannot be questioned. I think we are so much indebted to China that we cannot question their excesses. We have remedies in law. When you look at Article 3 of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, 1961, it is clear that as part of the mission of an embassy is to protect the strategic interests of a receiving state and its nationals. If China is not cooperating in protection of the interests of Kenyan nationals, we have a remedy under international law. And China is not working and complying to the Convention on the Law of Treaties, which requires parties to treaties to discharge their treaty obligations in utmost good faith. And lastly, I think it will be sad for the PS to insinuate that if we go to save Kenyans in China, those in Iraq will come calling, and those in Italy will come calling. We are at this situation because the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has failed to act. If it had engaged the Chinese government, cool down the situation, if Kenyans are misbehaving in China, the Chinese law is applicable to them. They can be arrested and charged in China. International law forbids the use of force against any citizens of any state in any circumstance. And therefore, China is in violation of the international law.
Mark, let me come to you. Is the situation that we are seeing right now an example of master-servant relationship like between Kenya and China, or have we borrowed so much from China that we cannot question what they are doing, even when we have all the evidence that Kenyans are actually suffering in various Chinese cities?
Ben, I want to answer your question, but make it a bit worse. Number one, let's be very clear. It's not just a matter of master-servant. It's a matter of blatant racism. I think the videos I have seen have shown that this is a people who are dedicated to the demeaning, the hate and mistreatment of people with black skin, be they from Africa or anywhere. When people are refused to access basic services simply because of the skin color that they have, that is racism. Any time where we as a country refuse to stand up both vocally, in terms of diplomacy, in terms of helping our people in China, then we've let our people down. I know there's the argument that we do not have the money for it, or we can't afford to bring all of them back, but I can assure you, Ben, that we have enough to go and tell the Chinese, you know what, you cannot treat our people like this, and we're sending a Dreamliner, and guess what, if the issue is the money, I'm sure not everyone in China who wants to live is dead broke. Then what we should do is find out how much can they put put together so that KQ can go pick them up. There are so many solutions to this. For us to sit there and imagine that these people are completely helpless is a lie, because let's remember, these are people who were kicked out of hotels, some of them. So the government should at least meet them halfway. Why am I saying halfway? Because they should at least ask them, how much fare can you afford to come back home? But the government should also be very clear in understanding that if they keep quiet today, if they keep quiet now, then soon this will be a matter of modus operandi, that every time you, me, or anyone goes to China, we'll be treated like we are third-rate human beings, if not monkeys.
Ken, what now happens? Because this has been ongoing for the best part of 2 weeks. Do you expect the government, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to change its tack on this?
I don't expect the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to change its stance, Ben, because what the PS Macharia was telling us is definitely the government position. A PS cannot make such grave statements without the blessing of the CS and the entire government. Kenya shifted from west to east, and it went to east to partly achieve personal selfish interests of the powers that be. And therefore it becomes very difficult to make serious decisions against your master.
Okay.
We don't expect change of strategy, but we call upon human rights activists, we call upon the international community to intervene.
Right.
Because this matter is not just affecting Kenya and China, it is Africa.
It's a much bigger issue.
Yeah.
What is your take on the reports that we are getting that the government has said it can help Kenyans stuck there, but they have to pay for their flights home?
That is a joke. Kenya has mobilized resources at local level and international level to address the effects of COVID-19. And part of this fund can be used to bring Kenyans who are in distress abroad back home. We cannot let our people suffer and die in foreign countries because they cannot afford their fare back. It is the responsibility of government to secure its nationals, both domestically and internationally. This government has money to bring people back.
Where is the Foreign Affairs CS in this?
Well, I wish our President Uhuru Kenyatta, because I would know where my CS is. But what Morai is asking is the CS, who is the primary responsibility is to execute orders as given by the president. And when the president was sworn into office, he swore before all Kenyans that he's going to protect lives and properties of all Kenyans, both within the Kenyan territory and overseas. Now you have Kenyans who are overseas, they are bleeding, and they are pleading, but the CS responsible is missing in action. Now, if I were the President of the Republic of Kenya today, I would do what Ramaphosa did in South Africa. When one of my ministers misbehaved, I fired, or rather I suspended the minister. So if the President does not reverse the situation, then we'll assume, rightfully so, that he doesn't care about Kenyan interests outside. And then we'll begin asking ourselves, how can we allow our brothers and sisters to be mistreated in foreign countries, yet you have a functional government in Kenya, you have the CS for Foreign Affairs, you have the PS for Foreign Affairs. We'll start asking ourselves, is there something that the Chinese know about public servants of rank, and maybe they're blackmailing them, and for that reason, the Kenyan cannot act? Those are the questions we're supposed to be asking ourselves. Because when you look at the president, he swore in broad daylight before noon that is going to protect our lives and properties. Kenyans are bleeding outside, and it's not as if we don't have resources. We understand that there's an airline called Kenya Airways, which has got a lot of planes, a number of them are stuck. Why can't we just send one to go and pick our brothers and sisters in distress? If the issue of cost, if we can't access the contingency fund, which I understand is, the resources are about 1 billion Kenyan shillings,
right.
Let's get an M-Pesa number today and ask Kenyans to donate money specifically to get Kenyans in distress wherever they are. And one expects that the CS is going to be under pressure in the next couple of days to give us a summary that how many Kenyans do we have, say, in China, How many want to come back home? How many Kenyans do we have in South Africa? How many want to come home? In as much as you've got these international protocols and maybe there's no landing, planes are not supposed to be moving around, but I know for a fact that if a diplomat requests permission to have this kind of flights, they'll be granted. The British High Commission in Kenya has done very well. They've been speaking to their nationals and giving them help. Then lastly, you ask yourself, what is Sarah Serem doing in China today? Assuming that she's actually in China, she's in Beijing. What is she doing today? When she wakes up in the morning and Kenyans are crying, what is she actually doing? What's her responsibility there? It's to protect lives and properties. You are not going to tell us you're going to protect the properties of Kenyans if the very Kenyans are already dead.
All right. You're right. People can move as long as they are cleared to travel. And of course, once they get here, they have to be placed under quarantine. Mark, what are your thoughts on the issue of Kenyans being told they can be evacuated, but they have to pay for their flights home? And in line with this, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs saying it has no money. Where does the budget go? And I'm asking this, bearing in mind that the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary, Ukur Yatani, said that if the situation gets compelling, then money will be provided.
Well, first and foremost, the question has to be asked whether they budgeted for such an eventuality, and if they didn't, then the ministry has failed in terms of its COVID response, because I imagine any civil servant of note would have imagined that there would be Kenyans in distress across the globe. So they should have already made arrangements, not just in terms of budgets, but also in terms of talking to Kenya Airways and asking them whether they could fly people back to Kenya at cost. Now, I am 50-50 about the idea of Kenyans paying for their way back, because number one, if there is a Kenyan stuck in China and he has the money and is able to pay for the ticket, then he should. Why would I support for that person to pay? Because that allows someone who couldn't have paid to be able to get on the same plane as this person who's able to pay. We've all got to do our part, because there's someone who's in distress, and their distress is not financial. Their distress is just that they're stuck in China with nowhere to fly to. So we need to be sensitive to the different kinds of distress. I do not see anything particularly wrong with people being asked to pay. I find something particularly wrong with us not making an effort to at least reach these people and give them the option of coming back home. Because guess what? Even if they had to pay, and let's say it's because it's a flight organized by government, let's say the ticket is 30,000-40,000 shillings per person. Imagine, even if Kenyans in China asked us to contribute money as Kenyans so that they're able to raise their fare, I would rather have that conversation, that they have an option to come back home, instead of wholesale saying they can't come back home, yet we are asking Kenyans to contribute money every day towards that fund of coming back home. So we need to balance our approach to understand that the distress might not necessarily be financial, but we do need to take care of our brothers and sisters who are being mistreated simply because of the color of their skin.
All right, let's take a quick commercial break. We continue to keep an eye on this developing story for you. We are not letting this go. Pressure mounting on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Kenyans in various cities across China continuing to send distress calls to Nairobi. Where does this end? We shall continue to keep an eye on that for you. Let's take a quick commercial break here on Inside Politics. When we come back, we stay on the issue of the COVID-19 global pandemic. Focus this time on Kenyan citizens back home. How seriously are Kenyans taking this? Remember, the number of confirmed infections right now stands at 262. Mass testing is yet to begin. The projections say the numbers could rise. Of course, there is a nationwide daily curfew, 10 hours from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. Now, we understand Kenyans have been trying to